Welcome to another edition of In the Spotlight, brought to you by Crimson Cloak Publishing, the earth-friendly publisher with books for both adults and children in a wide variety of genres, available in paperback and hardcover, as ebooks, and with some audiobooks as well. In the Spotlight is a wide-ranging weekly interview show with authors, entrepreneurs, professionals, and other experts. Your host is Cynthia McGregor. Opinions and views expressed by the guests or hosts on this show do not necessarily reflect the opinions and views of the creator, Crimson Cloak Radio, the network, the hosts, or sponsors. And now, here's Cynthia.
Thank you very much, Carly McCracken, and welcome everyone to another edition of In the Spotlight. My first guest today is Marie Ann Cope, and Marie is a UK-based dark fantasy and horror author living in a small town in North Wales with her two cats, Jasmine and Texas. As well as being an author, Marie runs her own accountancy business, is a yoga teacher, has her own radio show on local community radio, runs a book club and writing group, and co-hosts a bi-monthly crime club. Wow, that's quite a bunch of accomplishments, Marie.
Does make me sound busy, doesn't it?
Marie is here today to introduce her books into the U.S. She is currently writing 3 different series: the Bonds series, the Misfits series, and the Tales from a Scary Girl series, all of which we'll hear more about on the show. As a thank you to all listeners, Marie is giving away the first 5 chapters of Bonds, the first volume in the Bonds series, in ebook form, EPUB or Mobi, to all listeners who contact her through her website. Get ready to write this down. Here comes the website: www.marie, that's M-A-R-I-E, Anne, that's A-N-N-E, Cope, that's C-O-P-E, .com/contact. If you contact her at that address, at that website, and say that you heard it on this show, she'll send you the first 5 chapters of Bonds, the first volume in the Bonds series. Marie, before I ask you questions about your books, I've got to ask you, how the heck did an author in Wales get a cat named Texas, which is an American state?
Everybody asked me that question. The lady who I got him from, she already has a cat, and he was called Austin. Now, not related to the US, but I just thought, oh well, Austin, because Austin is obviously a city in Texas, so I thought I'll just call him Texas, and that's where it came from. And he's a great cat. He's huge. He's really tall. He's just a big cat. He thinks he's a panther though.
And how did your other cat get named Jasmine?
Well, she's white. I mean, they're both rescues, but she's white. And originally when I got her, she was called Lily. But at the time, I was considering having children, and I would have named my daughter Lily. So I had to change her name. And Jasmine are one of my favourite flowers, so I called her Jasmine.
How many books are in the Bonds series? Sorry, I sneezed. How many books are in the Bonds series, and what are they about?
Well, there's going to be 4 books in the full series. Now, I've written and I've published the first 3. So we've got Bonds, which you've mentioned already. Broken Bonds is the follow-up, and Bonds Rebound is the book I bought out last year, the end of last year. The final volume, which will be called Eternal Bonds, it's being planned at the moment by the voices in my head. And it's going to continue the much darker storyline of Bonds Rebound, and I think it might upset some of my fans. I just have this feeling, because they want a certain ending, and I think they might be a little bit disappointed. as to what they're about, well, Bonds, which is the first volume in the series, tells the story of Becca Martin's struggle to accept her birthright as a witch and Anthony Cardova's battle to break his vampire curse. Now, the two of them are linked together by Isabella Cardova, who is Anthony's adulterous wife and also Becca's ancestor. Now, to break his curse, Anthony has to destroy Becca. To save herself, Becca must use her gift of the craft, which is witchcraft, and only one of them can win. So that's the sort of about the first one. Now, the second one, Broken Bonds, it continues the story of Becca and Anthony, and it sees Becca's promise to free Anthony from his vampire curse severely tested. And it's only through Becca unearthing the past of the warlock who cursed Anthony that the key to his future is actually revealed, but it forces her to make the biggest decision of her life. Should she risk everything and everyone in her life to keep her promise to this man, a man who'd rather see her dead, or should she actually do something she swore she'd never do, which is break a promise? Now, the Bonds Rebound, which is the volume that I brought out late last year, is the third volume, and it kind of looks at the catastrophic impact, I suppose, that past actions can have on the present, because Anthony is hunted down by a former comrade, now turned enemy, who is intent on revenge. Now, his name is Jules Carson, and he was the most ruthless highwayman in history, and he'll stop at nothing to reclaim what is his and to pay back Anthony for past wrongs. But how does he draw him out? He kidnaps and tortures that which Anthony holds most dear, which is Becca. And as I say in the story, it's part of the tagline, it asks the question of, can anyone ever really escape their past? So that's a bit of a synopsis about what they're all about.
I take it from the fact that he's a highwayman, I take it that this takes place some time ago and not in the present day.
It's split between the past and the present day because it's supernatural stories, so they're drawn into the present day by the warlock, and it's all linked to curses and spells that he put on these people in the past. And in some cases, it means they now. I don't want to say too much without giving the stories away. You see, so I'm being a little bit cagey about what I say, but because of what happens in Broken Bonds, it means that a lot of the people that he cursed, that the warlock cursed, are now walking and breathing in the present day. So I'll leave it at that. That's not giving too much away, I hope.
No, I don't think you're giving too much away. But tell me, you said something to me before the show about getting the series adapted for TV or film. Is that your intention?
Yeah, I mean, when I write, I'm very visual, and so as I'm writing, it's almost like the film is playing in my head, and that's the way I see it. And it's probably most writers' dreams, but it is my biggest dream to see my work on the big screen or on the small screen. I'm not bothered. As long as it's on the screen, it'll be great. So I'm currently working with a development executive to sell the film rights and the TV rights to Bonds, and we've actually got production company and a writer. We've got a production company interested and a writer-director on board now. That was a very recent announcement. I found that out on Friday. But we're still looking for a network, and we're still looking, because you need the network to actually get it distributed. So if anybody out there's got a contact, let me know.
Are you looking for US distribution then, rather than
UK, I think, but I wouldn't say no to anything, to be honest with you.
Okay. What about your other series? You have 2 other series. Are you envisioning them getting onto the screen also?
Well, the Misfits is a children's story, so that possibly is but that'd be animated. I see that as being an animated, children's show because it's aimed at the age 7 and upwards age group. And the Tales from a Scary Girl are actually short stories. So, as we know from Stephen King, short stories lend themselves more to movies.
When you were writing the Bond series and writing scary for adults, what made you decide to try your hand at writing for children?
It's something I've always wanted to do, and I'd sort of been playing with the idea of the character of Achu the werewolf for years, really. And a couple of years ago, I just thought, I'm just going to go for it. I had sort of the start of an idea in my head, and I sat down. I've got an illustrator friend, Jonathan Breer, who's extremely talented, and I sat down and chatted it through with him, and he was really interested in creating the characters for me. It's something that he'd not done for a long time, and so we threw some ideas around together, and what I wanted to do was make it funny but also educational, but still staying quite true to my horror sort of the genre I like to write in. So the characters I've created, we have a Chew, who's a werewolf with allergies and narcolepsy. I have Mina, who is a vampire. She's got no fangs and she loves the sun and hates raw meat. Then I've got Boo, who's a ghost, and he's got a very short attention span, and he likes to sit and chat with people rather than scare them to death, which is what he's supposed to do. And Zoe, who's a zombie, and she has an obsession with speed, and she needs to carry around duct tape in a backpack because she zooms around, all her body parts keep falling off. So the premise behind them is they're all failing at being what their parents and teachers actually expect them to be. And it's through the story I take them on a journey where they learn that being different, being unique, isn't just okay, it's actually perfect. And this is the message that I want to give to kids, that just be yourself. Don't try and fit in. Don't try and be like everybody else, because there's nothing wrong with you the way you are. And I think that's a really important message to get across to children.
Very.
Especially, I don't know what it's like in the US, but in the UK, there's a big problem with bullying, and kids are always getting picked on because they're not like everyone else. And it's important that, they recognise that they are perfectly okay the way they are. And I have taken it into primary schools, and it's been really well received by the children and the teachers alike. So I'm really pleased with that. So I am planning, I've drafted the storyline for the second one in the series, which will be the Misfits and the Magic Stone. I've just got to sit down and start writing it now.
Good. Now tell us about Tales from a Scary Girl. What's that about, and is that for adults or kids?
It's for adults, and it's a collection of short stories. And as part of I said at the beginning of the show that I run a book club and a writing group, and each month I set the group a task, give them a topic, and come up with a short story. And I do it as well, but the stories that I write will be used in the next volume of Tales from a Scary Girl. So I think they are for grown-ups. So they're the volume that's out at the moment is a mix of werewolf, vampire, serial killer, curses. There's 12 short stories in there, a bit of a mix of everything. And I think my short stories, the way I write short stories has changed over the years, because I used to sit down and start at the beginning and work my way through to the end. But it's bizarre because now, for me, I think the trick is to start at the end, because if I know how it'll end, I can then weave the story in and create the clues and the twists, to make people sort of go, at the end, and things like that. And I think writing in the first person, which I tend to do quite a lot now, also helps, because it helps to make things more sinister as well as disguise certain elements in your stories. So I find it's harder actually to write a short story than a novel, not because of the length, but I think it's just, I don't know what it is. I think it's trying to get everything you want into a much smaller space, I suppose. But it's great fun. I love writing short stories. They are fun.
Great. Now tell us about your radio show. What's the topic of your show? It's a weekly show?
It's a bi-weekly show, so it's called Into the Darkness, and as you may have guessed, it's a radio show all about all things horror, fantasy, ghosts, and all that sort of stuff. So I talk quite a lot about horror films. I'm currently doing a series about the tropes in horror films. So the show I've just done was all about the different types of characters that you get in a horror film, especially a slasher flick. So you have your jock, you have your cheerleader, you have your nerd, you have your nice guy, and you have your last girl. That they are a staple, and they are very stereotyped, but they all have a role in a horror movie. I have guests on my show, so I run a crime club with an ex-profiler who's worked with I think I'll probably get this wrong. I think they used to be called a BAU in the US. He's a British ex-police officer, but he did do some work over there. So he's interviewed a lot of serial killers, and we run a crime club where we discuss serial killers. So I've had him on my show, and he's been talking about the people he's met and things like that. I've had movie producers on my show because they work at the college, because it's a community radio station. It's based at the university near where I live, and they have a media studies department. And there's a film producer who works there, so I got him on my show not so long ago as well. So it's quite good to hook up with people and get people in.
Are you affiliated with the university that's near you? Are you a student or a teacher there?
No, I'm far too old to be a student. But no.
No, you're never too old to be a student, Marie.
No, that's very true, actually. I knew that as soon as I said it, I thought that's not strictly true. No. I'm not a student anymore because I run my own business and stuff. I still do learning. There's lots of things I like to learn, but I work for the radio station, which itself is affiliated with the university. So it's a voluntary radio show. So we're all volunteers that run the radio station.
Ah. Would you like to read us? You were going to read the opening scene from the prologue of Bonds. Would you like
sure.
to go ahead
sure.
and read that?
Yep.
Go ahead.
Okay. Isabella's whimpering carried on the still night air. Anna stared at her daughter. The ice that had surrounded her heart for so long was starting to melt. As despicable a person as Isabella was, she didn't deserve this. No one deserved this. Anna's gaze shifted to the man who held her daughter. How on earth could she save Isabella from this monster? The reality was that she couldn't. Why, Anthony? Why did you do this to yourself? She asked. You know why, Anna. No one makes a fool of me and gets away with it. He grappled with the young woman in his arms, his hand clenched over her mouth. But this, she said, gesturing towards him with her gnarled hands. Why did you have to go this far? Anna stared up at him, gone were the soft brown eyes and gentle smile, kindness and generosity. In their place lay only evil. His eyes were like coal against his chalky white skin, and his mouth was a grim line. A rare smile seemed odd on his cold face and revealed the sharpness of his teeth. You didn't think I'd do it, did you, old woman? Anthony's sharp fingernails caressed his captive's exposed neck as he spoke. Let Isabella go, Anthony. I think you've made your point. Made my point? He said, shaking Isabella as if she was a rag doll. If it wasn't for this harlot, none of this would have happened. Only you chose to do what you... Because of her, she betrayed me, she humiliated me, and worst of all, she made me the laughingstock in my own village. Do you have any idea what that is like? Let her go. Or else you'll do what, old woman? He clenched his jaw, his teeth bared. Do you honestly think you can stop me? I didn't want it to come to this, Anthony. I wanted to help you. Oh, don't patronise me, old woman. You'll never defeat me. You don't have the power. With a flick of his wrist, he snapped Isabella's neck and let her body slump to the ground. No! Anna staggered over to the slain girl. Huddled over her daughter, tears running down her face, she stared up at him. How could you? She was your wife. It's a pity she didn't act like it then. He turned and started to walk away. Anna remained hunched over Isabella, rocking the young woman back and forth, and cried. The moonlight illuminated the scene, and amongst the jagged headstones she watched her son-in-law walking away. A carnal rage surged through her body, and she stood up. She turned her face to the heavens and closed her eyes. I call upon the power of the four elements. Of earth, she said, thrusting her hands towards the ground. The earth rumbled. Anthony stopped. Of air, Anna whipped her hands around in a circular motion. Thunder crashed, the wind started to howl, and bruised clouds scudded across the sky. Of fire, she said, pointing her power fingers towards the sky. A bolt of lightning shot down, connecting with her power. Anna shuddered as electricity coursed through her frail body, infusing her with the strength she was going to need. And of water. She finished and clapped her hands 3 times. The thunder crashed overhead, and the dark, swirling clouds released their load. Anthony turned and stared at her, a mocking smile on his face. You think that will stop me, you fool. By my goddess and by my God, I call upon the power of the four elements, of earth, of air, of fire, of water. I call upon you to aid me and to protect me. Anna spun round on the spot, her arms heavenwards, her eyes closed, the mantra repeating on her lips. The wind roared, the thunder boomed. A bolt of lightning struck the earth in front of Anthony, throwing him to the ground. The electricity sparked and fizzed in the rapidly forming puddles. He tried to get up, but his hands and feet couldn't get traction in the mud. Anna turned to face him, and staring straight into the eyes of the man she had once loved, she pointed her arms towards him, lowered her head, and started to chant the spell of binding. She struggled to hold her position, her body convulsing as the power surged through her. Her gaze never leaving his, Anna thrust her palms to the earth, and the ground began to shudder. She stumbled, but held firm. A crack appeared at her feet and zigzagged its way towards Anthony, growing wider as it did so. Anna heard his laughter through the storm, but she blocked it out, the image of her slain Isabella foremost in her mind. The crack stopped at Anthony's feet. She closed her eyes again and slowly raised her hands skywards. Vines shot out of the gap and lashed themselves around his ankles. He used the traction to his advantage and hauled himself up, grabbing the sinewy stems with both hands, snapping them as though they were dried twigs. He strode towards Anna, her head still bowed as she chanted. She didn't respond as he stood in front of her and hooked his finger under her chin, tilting her head upwards. She didn't flinch as he spat in her face. She didn't shudder as he lowered his head, his cheek brushing her hair, until his mouth was next to her ear. "You'll never stop me, Anna. Remember that." He turned to walk away and picked up the broken vines as he went. He paused for a moment and then turned back. "Never," he said, and hurled the vines at Anna's face. She staggered backwards at the force of the impact, but she didn't break her concentration. Anthony snorted in derision and turned away from her once more. Anna regained her foothold in the mud, and drawing on all the power she had left, she thrust her palms towards him, sending a ball of light hurtling in his direction. It struck him in the lower back. Anthony staggered. Anna didn't falter. She raised her hands skywards, and the crevasse soon crawled with vines, which snaked across the earth and wrapped around Anthony's ankles once more. Anna yanked her hands down to her sides, and the vines snapped backwards, dragging Anthony off his feet. He crashed to the ground. More vines slithered from the earth. Anthony rolled over, kicking his legs to try to free himself, but this time they held firm. He dug his fingers deep into the earth and tried to drag himself away, but it was futile. The mud was too thin. He rolled over onto his back and sat up, yanking against his bindings with his hands, but they didn't budge. The vines snaked up his legs, holding him firm as more and more emerged from the ground, binding his wrists to the earth and winding around his torso. He bucked and kicked, expanding his muscles as much as he could to try to burst through, but it was impossible. Anna opened her eyes and saw the rage on his face, the veins pulsating in his neck as he strained against his fate. He looked up and caught her gaze, the vines creeping around his neck. "These won't hold me forever," he shouted, the sound muted by the vines which now engulfed his head. Finally, he was still. Anna nodded towards 8 men who'd been hiding in the shadows. She had asked them to stay out of the way, for their own safety, and they hadn't objected. They moved tentatively forward now, and she watched as they hauled Anthony's inert form into a stone sarcophagus. The men struggled, but managed to slide the lid into place, and Anna staggered forward, placing her palms flat on the lid. "Please make sure Isabella's put with the others," she said. The men nodded and retreated to the shadows. She turned her face to the heavens once more, closed her eyes, and began to chant the spell of interment. She shuddered as a lightning bolt shot through her body. Her hands glowed, and the light spread around the gaps in the sarcophagus and sealed it tight. Anna raised her arms to the heavens once more, and in barely a whisper she said, "By my goddess and by my god, my humble thanks for supporting me. I bid you take the intention behind my actions and see it executed for all time. As I do will, so mote it be." She pushed her weary body away from the casket, and the men crept out of hiding once again to lower it into the ground. No one spoke to her as she left. Her walking stick was clasped in one hand, her shawl clutched around her shoulders with the other. There you go. So that's the opening scene to Bonds, to prologue from Bonds.
But if she's killed him, and we know that from the outset, doesn't that kind of ruin the suspense?
She hasn't killed him, though.
She hasn't?
So that's the thing. She's put spells on him.
Oh, I thought she killed
So
him.
what's going to happen, you see? Because it's told across 2 timelines. It's told in the past and in the present. And basically the church where he's buried in the churchyard, in present time, that church becomes deconsecrated because they're building houses on it. So the spells break and Anthony becomes free. And he's searching out the one person who can save him, who can restore his humanity, and that's Becca.
Well, now, You said a teacher told you not to write horrible things again. What's the story behind that?
Well, it was when I was at primary school, and I would have been 9, 10, and I'd watched a certain movie, shall we say, that I wasn't supposed to have watched. I'll see if you can guess which movie when I tell you the story. And we needed to write a short story for class, and so I got my exercise book out and I drew a lovely picture, coloured it bright yellow to represent sand, and then drew a severed arm being found on the sand, and proceeded to write my version of Jaws. My teacher was not impressed at all. She hit me on the knuckles with a metal ruler and told me never ever to write anything so horrible again. And I never picked up a pen until I was in my mid-20s. That's the impact that teacher had on me of my creativity. And a similar thing happened to my dad when he was at school as well. He wrote a horror story, and his teacher told him never to write anything like that again. And my dad has never ever written a story since. So I'm going to write one of the spin-offs to Bonds that I'm going to write is going to be based around that story that my dad wrote, and I'll dedicate it to my dad.
Is your dad still alive?
He is. He'll be 82 in July.
Oh, God bless.
Yeah. So I want to get that book written for him.
Good. Now you said you got the idea for Bonds at a wedding?
Yeah, I'm not a fan of weddings. Anybody who knows me knows I just don't like them at all. But I got dragged to this wedding, and it was in an old stone church in Shropshire, which isn't too far from where I live now. And as the ceremony was going on, I was looking everywhere else but at the front of the church where I was supposed to be looking. And at the back of the church, there was a stone coffin, a stone sarcophagus, which I found very unusual for a village church. So of course it grabbed my attention, and it had lots of carvings on it, and this idea just popped into my head. So as most writers do, I carry a notepad around with me, so I started scribbling down an idea, and it was during the wedding ceremony, and even they'd all gone out for photographs, and my then husband he wasn't very happy that I was still sitting in the church writing this storyline down when I should be outside having photographs done. But that's where the idea from Bonds came from, and I just think if I'd never have gone to that wedding, maybe the story would never have been written.
Oh, goodness.
I know, it's weird, isn't it? The things that spark your interest and spark your imagination.
We have about 1 minute left, Marie. You had one story left you wanted to share with us about a prize-winning short story, which was not horror. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, it was a story I wrote because, like I was telling you about short stories before, and I entered. We have a carnival of words every year in Wrexham, which is my hometown, and I entered a short story called 2 Days in this competition, and it won. Now, I absolutely howled with laughter when they called my name out, and so did everybody who knows me, because it's not a romance per se. One of my friends described it as a passionate story, and it's very strange that that's the one that won the competition and not a horror one I'd also submitted. So I just thought that was quite funny, and I still find it still makes me laugh now as I think about it.
Marie, where can our listeners buy your books? On your website or where else?
They can get them through my website, or they can go directly to Amazon.com and just enter Marie-Anne Cope, Bonds by Marie-Anne Cope, and then the books will all come up. They're all linked in a series. So you can do that, or just go through my website. I've got a books page on my website that you can buy the books through there.
And again, your website is www.marieannecope.com, and don't forget to put an E at the end of
Yeah,
Anne.
it's an E at the end of Anne. Yeah. And if you do /books, and then you'll be able to see them all there.
Well, thank you very much for guesting on In the Spotlight, Marie-Anne Cope.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Good luck with your books.
Thank you. Thanks, Cynthia. Bye.
Bye now. Before I bring on our next guest, we need to do a commercial. Remember that the show is brought to you by Crimson Cloak Publishing, the publishers of a wide variety of books for adults and for kids, fiction and nonfiction. Featuring this week, I'll See You at Rainbow Bridge, a collection of stories by people who had the experience of having their deceased pets' spirits come to them and communicate with them. If you've ever lost a cat, a dog, a horse, any beloved pet, you'll be interested in the stories in I'll See You at Rainbow Bridge. And like all of Crimson Cloak's other books, they're available on Amazon or at crimsoncloakpublishing.com. And now my next guest is Evan Griffith. And Evan Griffith has experienced the creative life from all sides. As an art gallery owner, as a writer, see notesforcreators.com, as a graphic artist, and as a corporate design manager, and as what he calls a van life voyager. Over the decades, he's worked and played with hundreds of creatives. His bookitos celebrate soulful creative living, and in a minute I'll ask him what the heck a bookito is. I know, I've been reading them, but you don't know yet. You will. Evan is here today to talk about his website, notesforcreators.com, his bookitos, and the connected creative life. Evan shares insights, tips, and stories on soulful creative living through his bookitos and at notesforcreators.com. Notes for Creators is a rich resource for creators with a loose spiritual vibe. Evan, tell my listeners, what the heck is a bookito?
Well, first, Cynthia, thank you so much for having me on today. I'm really excited. And a bookito is really just my term for a short, powerful electronic book. And my whole intention with these bookitos is not to be fully immersive in, like a long book would be. I want somebody to be able to read a bookito and really enjoy it for in just a few hours, maybe just a couple days. So, for example, most books will dive into a deep, broad subject. For me, a bookito is the exact opposite, where if you're coming into a regular book, you want that book to last for weeks or even months. You want the full experience of a deep project. For a bookito, it's the opposite. You want to have it go on in such a short term that somebody can just enjoy it quickly, get in, get out, experience it, feel like they've had the full experience and not have to come into a deeper experience. And so right now I have a couple bookketos on Amazon right now with two more or three more coming out in the next 12 months. The first bookketo is Burn Baby Burn, and it's all about spiritualizing your creative practice. I've been in creative fields for a long time, and over the years I've found that the more that I turn it into a spiritual practice, almost like in the same way that somebody who is physically wanting to be at their optimum turns, say, like their yoga practice into a spiritual practice, you get more out of it. It's more powerful, it's more potent, it's more deeply meaningful. You're able to go deeper, further, faster. So that's what Burn Baby Burn is about. It's about how to spiritualize your creative work. And then the second bookito is the Creative Morning Challenge. And this was all about a challenge I'd made for myself for 30 days. I've always been a night person. I painfully became a semi-regular person once we had our son 16 years ago. But still would always get up at the last moment, rush off, rush to the gallery. We own an art gallery, and go to work. And so I decided to challenge myself. I was feeling like I wasn't getting the same level of intensity in my work in the evenings after a long day at the gallery as I as I used to be able to do. So I challenged myself to do 30 days of my creative work in the mornings. And oh my God, it just took off. It was so powerful. I thought I would only maybe do 30 minutes to an hour earlier initially, and I found myself getting up 2.5 hours earlier. I mean, remember, this was only a 30-day experiment. So this 30-day experiment, it just jazzed me. I wrote an entire bookito and part of a second one in this 30 days just by getting up, capturing that energy that you have at the very first thing in the morning. It's extraordinary. So that's what Creative Morning Challenge is. It takes you from, I'm not sure if this is still going, but I think so. It takes you through it with me. It's kind of funny because it takes all my triumphs and really failures. I mean, I show the failures right up front and talk about them with just as much fervor as I do the successes. But now I'm committed. And toward the end of the bookito, I was already aware that I wanted to make this a lifestyle. So at the end of the bookito, it gives suggestions on how to transform a short creative morning challenge of, say, a week or 3 or 4 weeks into a full-blown creative morning lifestyle. And I'm actually living that lifestyle now. This is probably a year later. So it's been a real thrill to see it go from just kind of a lark to a full-blown lifestyle.
Thank you for that save. And I'll confess to my listeners that I had to run to the bathroom and I left Evan stuck with the microphone, having to vamp till ready, as they say. And
but that was a lot of fun.
So, Evan, getting back to what we planned before my sudden emergency, Notes for Creators started as reminders to yourself. Did you tell the audience about that?
No, I haven't. In fact, years ago, my wife and I were in Key West with a couple friends of ours, David and Sue Gordon, and these are extraordinary artists. They're in the outdoor art festival world, and we were taking a vacation with them. And so we're biking around, walking through shops, and at one point, somebody said something that I really wanted to write down. I can't remember what it was, but I was repeating it out loud in this shop, and I'm sure it was to the annoyance of everyone. And it was Sue, who's very funny, kind of in a sing-songy way, just goes, "If I know my Davy, he's got a pen and pad in his pocket." And, then she's making jokes about how every time she hugs her husband, David, she knows he's interested in her because he's got this pen and pad and paper there. So sure enough, he has a pen and paper. I take it out, I write it down. But I was so impressed that here, in the middle of a vacation, just lazing around on an afternoon, he still had it with him. And so for the rest of my life, I've always had a pad and paper. So just like everybody, just like your prior guest was talking about, always having notepads with her, I started using it for gallery business, for bookito ideas, for blog post ideas. And then at some point, I started adding in reminders to myself. They would be sort of like creative, spiritual reminders of my power or of things to do in my practice. And they were just short little, sometimes just a few words, just a sentence or two. They all fit on a 5x8 sheet of paper. And at one point I started sharing these on social media and they blew up. They became so popular. It was amazing. And so at nighttime, when I'm meditating and then I'm going to sleep, that's when it seems like I'm downloading all these ideas and I'm just writing these in the dark so I don't wake up my wife. You see me in the morning and it'll look like I'm somebody.
Use a flashlight. That's what I do.
Well, I'm afraid I started doing that, but I didn't want to wake her up, So I started.
With a flashlight?
Yeah, with a flashlight. So I actually started doing it in the dark, just, learning to write in the dark. Sometimes I would write on it twice. Yes. And I couldn't read it. So I just started ripping the pages off and throwing them by the side of the bed. And so now you come into my bedroom in the morning and it looks like somebody who's been sick for a week throwing tissue papers on the side of the bed, but it'll be, say, 10, 15, 20 of these notes. So that's how the whole Notes for Creators thing began.
You've got 3 more bookitos coming in the next 12 months. Did you tell the audience about that while I was in the bathroom?
Well, I didn't tell them about what they were, but they all encompass a broad theme, which is creative spirit living. And so one of them is called "It Is Solved by Walking," and it's about how what a creative godsend going out for a walk is, um, and then it goes on from there. But yes, I've got 3 bookitos coming out in about the next 12 to 13 months.
Evan, if if our listeners understand what a 30-day, 2-hour creative morning challenge is, what might it consist of for them?
I actually suggest, because I was mentioning this a little bit when I was talking about the Creative Morning Challenge in the earlier segment, and I started out thinking that I would only get up earlier by about 15, 30 minutes, and it ultimately ended up being 2 hours a day, 2 to 2.5 hours a day. But for anybody else who's listening to this, I was a night owl my whole life. I know that that sounds like a horror show to anybody to even contemplate getting up even 10 minutes earlier. So my suggestion is do whatever you can, even if it's only 5 minutes earlier. You will be blown away at the energy you have in the mornings. I'm a confirmed night person, and now I've evolved into this creative morning lifestyle just because that first hour and a half of the day is extraordinary. But I suggest anybody else, make it a game, do it only for a week to a month like I did, and then you can always enlarge it from there.
What inspired you to explore soulful creative living?
I'd like to say it was inspiration, but it was really catastrophe, and catastrophe twice. So years ago, we own an art gallery. We've been in business for 23 years, and our first location was in the middle of Palm Beach County. We moved up into this open air, outdoor lifestyle center that was coming online. You might be familiar with it. It's called Abacoa. But for everybody else who's elsewhere, it's just a really nice, new, opulent outdoor lifestyle center, shopping center. But things went wrong very, very quickly. We moved in and it just didn't live up to its promise, and people started going bankrupt all around us. Just at a rapid pace. Literally, by the time we left a few years later, 14 stores in our immediate vicinity had all gone bankrupt. And so in the middle of this extraordinary agony of losing all of our money, I was walking my dog one night, and I just looked up to the sky and just was like, take this fear from me, take this anxiety from me. I wasn't even speaking to anyone or anything in particular. And I walked a few more paces with my dog, and I literally felt like I was missing something. And what's comical and looking back on it is what I was missing was my fear was gone that fast. It was something so amazing, this kind of this spiritual experience, that for the next 3 days, despite all of our problems, I was floating on a bliss cloud. I was just in this kind of rapturous place. I became really intensely excited by all things contemporary spiritual, about how you can change your thoughts and change your life, change the foundation of your thinking, and things will change. So I started applying them in the midst of all this misery, and damn if it didn't start to work. It was just like bit by bit by bit. And I mean, really, and then within God, I want to say like in a year, we moved out. We were able to extricate ourselves from that situation, move into another one. We ended up having the best years of our life. And then then the crash happened. So 5 years later, the crash happened. We're paying down the debts from the first catastrophe, and all of a sudden, this second existential business crisis happened. But this time, I was armed, and I was living those principles again. We got through it, and even though it was a brutal financial experience of near bankruptcy again, they were some of the most elation high times of my life. And so that, reading about it, applying it, wanting to learn more about it, made me want to write about it so I can convey it to other people.
I love the way you play with language in your books. I've read one of your bookitos so far, and I started the second one, but haven't finished it yet. I love the way you play with language. Is that important to you?
Oh my gosh, it's the highest value for me, Cynthia. In fact, I feel like, you know how people will say something is high vibration, and for me, if I'm not feeling playful, then I know that I'm not there. So it's whether it could be writing or it could be in my business life with my son. I have a 16-year-old son, so all those issues that come up with teenagerhood, and every time I'm not in a playful place, I know that I'm not being fluid, I'm not being flexible. Um, so yes, I'm always trying to get back to playful.
Great. What do you hope people will gain from your bookitos and from Notes for Creators?
I hope they get the same sense of freedom that I have, and that I've read so many people have. That no matter what you go through, it, that you've got this greater self, this greater consciousness that you can draw on at all times, that will draw to you exactly what you need when you need it.
Can you quickly tell us about your upcoming bookitos? What's in them? When are they coming out? Where can people buy them? All these good questions.
Oh, yes. So the very next bookito, I'm finishing it up right now, literally this week. And it's called The Artist, the Mystic, and the Scientist, 3 Aspects of Creative Genius. And it treats the archetype or the energy of an artist or a mystic or a scientist as basically fields you can tap into. Like you can tap in, for those who are more just materialist oriented, they would think of it maybe in a psychological way, that they can tap into these identities within themselves. They can summon them as they need them. And each identity deals with different crises that we encounter in our life. So an artist they're improvisational. An artist will just jump in and start working before they even know what's doing. They're playing. And an artist will work with whatever they've got at hand. A mystic is the deep connective source, which will always appreciate everything regardless of what's going on in your life and regardless of your results. The mystic appreciates. The mystic doesn't even care about results. So whenever things are getting you down, that's the mystic side that you want to tap into. And then the scientist is the energy or the archetype that you want to tap into to learn, for feedback, for experimentation, and for pushing yourself forward. So I feel like with those 3 identities, those 3 energies, you just can't go wrong.
Talk a little louder. I can see where
okay.
the volume issue.
Oh, certainly. But I feel like those three archetypes and energies will draw forth the creative genius within you. So that should be coming out in July or August on Amazon.
In July on Amazon. Now, these bookitos are all ebooks. You don't have them in print?
I don't have them in print yet, but they're ebooks right now. And then my intention is to get 5 ebooks out, then start doing the print and the audio books.
Now, in Burn Baby Burn, you call one of your 3 steps expressing love energy. Tell us a little about that, especially how it relates to work and life. And then please read us. You have prepared a one-page excerpt. One-page excerpt on expressing love energy.
Yeah.
So if you'll first tell us about expressing love energy and then read us the excerpt.
Well, expressing love energy is the single principle that I've stumbled on that made the most difference in my life. And it is not results driven. It's all about trying to infuse what I do with love, with affection, with appreciation, and with joyfulness. And so I think of it as trying to, like, even before I walked up here, I'm just almost in a prayerful way infusing love energy, to you and to this experience. And then and the same thing when I go into writing or when I go into work. But here, let me just go ahead and read a little bit from the bookito.
Talk a little louder.
Okay. And this is called The Second Principle, Express Love Energy Daily. Here's where life becomes fulfilling. When you move in the direction of your dreams every day, you'll notice I use the term express love energy as the driver for this second principle. There are many other ways I could have stated the premise for this aspect of your creative engagement that you'd be familiar with. Work hard daily on your plan. Commit time every day toward your goal. Make an extreme effort each and every day, no matter what. Execute, execute, execute. There are many toil and drudge ways to speak of advancing towards one's destiny. Expressing love energy sounds weirdo, fringe, woo-woo, but we don't care. Love energy is the most effective force in the known universe. Why not leverage it? Every time you are touched by someone's story, it's because love energy was transmitted and received. Every time you engage in the things you relish, you are immersed in love energy. Every human interaction that benefits all parties has love energy at its core. Expressing this love energy is what creators do. That child dancing to Lady Gaga, expressifying herself. That runner giving up many slack moments to train intensely, expressing love energy in a focused, exalted, burning way. If you were to do only one thing in your life, and you were to forget all other precepts handed down for generations, if you could only do one thing, and it was to express love energy at every turn, your life would overflow with wonders. Forget vision, forget purpose, forget renewal, forget working hard or working smart, forget etiquette, forget firm handshakes, forget 10,000 cultural expectations. If you were to only express love energy throughout your days, the world would curl itself at your feet and purr for you. The world would never stop showing you its delights. Expressing love energy is the secret sauce of human existence. And so that's from Burn Baby Burn.
Yes, I think I read that already, but I'm not sure. Yeah, I think so. I you know I we eat dinner at 6:15 or around 6:15, and so by the time we finish eating dinner and blah 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 blah, I go to bed at 8 o'clock. So that doesn't leave me much time for reading, which is why it's taking me so long to read your bookitos.
Yes, yes. And in fact, because I'm a writer, because I own an art gallery, and because I've got a wife and a child I adore, I have a hard time reading too. Like I'm just like snippets in the bathtub, snippets right before I fall asleep, you know. So
Yeah.
I get it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell us about your art gallery.
So Studio E Gallery, it's been in business for 23 years. It's a contemporary art gallery, and we show living artists. And the reason I make that distinction is the highest parts of the art world will show dead artists. And we made a commitment from the beginning to always support living artists. They're contemporary, imaginative, inventive artists. It's phenomenal. And we've gone from being a pathetic little gallery when we first opened in Lake Worth 23 years ago to now moving into a really affluent, or not now, but 10, 15 years ago, moving into its current space about 15 years ago. And it is stunning. And I've got to tell you just a quick story that about having dreams and then being in and having them come together. So we started this little hole in the wall art gallery in a place where people didn't buy much art. And so we always had this vision. We just wanted to be at a certain level, and we kept working. And, if you're in business, you're walking through your space, you're always just taking notes about what you need to improve. And so we'd moved to our third location. It was in Palm Beach Gardens, beautiful space. This is the location where we really started to just thrive. And Ann and I are walking, making notes, need to light this, need to adjust this, need to change something out. And it was almost like we were both struck at the same time, like, oh my God, we're standing in our dream gallery. Like we'd been dreaming of this for years. We'd already been in the gallery for 2 years. We'd already been in it for 2 years. It wasn't like it just happened 2 weeks earlier. We'd been in it for a year and a half or 2 years. And we realized, holy crap, we are standing in our dream. And we didn't even realize it. Like sometimes you just move forward and you don't even realize how much of what you wanted is coming true in your life. And that was just a beautiful moment.
Now, people can buy your bookitos on notesforcreators.com. Is that correct?
Yes, they can find my bookitos at Notes for Creators, or they can find them on Amazon. just look up Evan Griffith, and you'll find my bookitos.
Now that's Griffith, Griffith, and the first name is Evan Griffith. And you can find the bookitos that way on Amazon, or you can find them by looking by their titles, or you can find them on notesforcreators.com. And they're a fun read. They're a light read, they're a fun read, they're an inspiring read. I must admit, I get up at 5 o'clock anyhow, so
so you don't need it. You're living it.
Yeah, that's my lifestyle.
Yeah, but see, it came from the opposite, trying to become you, and that's what that book is about. Trying to become Cynthia McGregor. That should have been the subtitle.
But you didn't know me when you wrote the book.
No, that's true. That's true. That'll be the the next book in the series then. Yeah. How to be Cynthia McGregor. 5 a.m.
Maybe I should write that. No, I don't think so. I'll let you write it. Well, we have about 4 minutes left, Evan. What would you like our audience to know in the last 4 minutes?
I don't know why this story is jumping into my mind, but during the crash years, we were trying to save our business, and we have a big van, as most galleries do. So it's this big, beautiful van, and we had covered it with photos of the artwork that we carried, and then all of a sudden the crash happened, and everybody was going out of business, and we had 8 galleries right in our vicinity. 80% of the galleries around us all went bankrupt, and I'm trying to figure out how not to go bankrupt. And so I'm asking and I'm asking, and I started delivering my own artwork back in order to save shipping. So I was on my 3rd or 4th trip, and I'm freaking out because the summer is coming, which is always our off season. Yeah, it's our dead season. Yeah. And so I'm just asking, and this weird thing happens. So for 2 days, I'm asking out loud. I'm writing it. I'm asking out loud. I'm saying it in my mind. What can I do to earn money to save this business? And then I'm driving down the west coast of Florida on my way back, and all of a sudden this little electric bulb goes off. Oh, call this art transporter and see if he could hire you, use you. And it was just one of these tingly moments. I was like, oh, that's it. I'm going to call him. So I immediately call him, and he's got a van. He travels all around the United States. And at this point, you've got to remember, everybody is laying people off. They're not hiring people. So
I went bankrupt at that point, too.
Yeah, and I was near bankrupt for like 2 or 3 years. And so the odds of him wanting an extra person was nil. I call him up, and the weirdest thing, all these galleries were going bankrupt across the United States. He couldn't keep up with the business. He had to be transporting all this artwork back to artists or to other galleries. So within, I think it was like 4 days, he had me on the road. And so I guess what I'm saying about that is just ask. If there's something, just keep asking relentlessly till the answer comes. So that's my, I don't know why that story popped out, but
no, it's a good story. It's a good lesson. It's a good lesson.
Yeah.
It's a good lesson. Well, folks, my guest has been Evan Griffith, and again, his website is notesforcreators.com. And I had lunch with him recently. He's a wonderful person, a fascinating person to talk to. I love the bookitos. I devoured one. I'm partway into the second, and I'm really enjoying them. And you will too. So thank you, Evan, for being on the show.
Oh, Cynthia, thank you so much. What a pleasure. And thank you for throwing me that challenge.
When you gotta go, you gotta go. I'll confess to having taken the computer into the bathroom with me on 2 previous occasions when it happened.
That's great.
But on those occasions, I was talking to somebody who was on Skype.
So they didn't have to come in with you.
Right. I wasn't bringing you into the bathroom with me.
Oh.
You've been listening to In the Spotlight, brought to you each week at the same time by Crimson Cloak Publishing, publishers of a wide variety of fiction and nonfiction for children and for adults, everything except erotic romances. No erotic romances. Whatever else you want, look us up. CrimsonCloakPublishing.com. Remember to tune in at the same time this week, same time next week and every week. Listen in, and we have fascinating guests. And remember to pass a smile along. This is Cynthia McGregor. See you next week. Bye-bye.
You have been listening to In the Spotlight with your host, Cynthia McGregor, brought to you by Crimson Cloak Publishing. For a wide variety of books for both adults and children in print, ebook, and audio formats, join us every Tuesday at the same time as In the Spotlight brings you interesting guests to entertain and enlighten you. I'm Carly McCracken. On behalf of Crimson Cloak Publishing, thank you for joining us, and we hope you'll join us again next week.